So imagine it's November or December. You have 8 or 10 applications due in the next week or two. You haven't started writing your statement of purpose and you have deadlines at work or at college. What do? Well, actually, you should be cutting back on your screen time, cutting back on socializing, maybe even sacrifice sleep a little and get down to writing those statements of purpose. But you and I both know that you are going to be tempted to use AI to write your statement of purpose because it's so easy. Now, don't think for 1 second that I feel that using AI for SOP writing is ethical. I don't think it is. But you're not going to listen to me. And so if I can't convince you to not use AI to write your SOP, at least let me show you how to use AI the correct way to write your SOP for your master's applications. Now remember, if when you're using AI, you need to give it the right input. If you go to ChatGPT or Gemini or any other AI tool and you just tell it to write an SOP for you, the output is going to be crap. Because you need to give the AI the necessary context about your profile, about your career goals, and about why that university and program is the right fit for you and what you can contribute to the university for it to do a good job. So the way we've done this is by basically giving every AI 2 input files. We have one file which is about the student profile. In that file, we articulate the student's different achievements, whether it be in terms of project work, research papers, internships, work experience, or other academic honors achieved. We also share the career goal of the student and why the student is a good fit for that university. On the other hand, we have a master prompt that we feed into each and every AI, which instructs the AI exactly how to write the statement of purpose and how to use the data from the student profile that we give it. So we explain to the AI what structure we want and what sort of tone or style we want for it to write. We also explain what the word limit needs to be, both in terms of the minimum words required and the maximum words that are allowed in the statement of purpose. So here's what we're going to do. I am going to feed both these files into 3 different AI. So I'm primarily going to use ChatGPT, I'm going to use Gemini, and I'm going to use DeepSeek. Now, why these 3 different AI? Because these are the 3 most used AIs in terms of LLMs in 2025. So what I will do is I will upload both these files to each LLM one by one, generate the output, then I will read the output or the SOP to myself and share a short analysis of how the SOP sounds. Once I'm done doing this for all the 3 different SOPs, I will create a scorecard where I will use different parameters and score each LLM on those parameters, coming up with a final score to explain which LLM is the best, which LLM is mid, and which LLM is the worst. So let's start now with the first AI tool to be used, that is ChatGPT. So I'm now going to go and input the files.
One eternity later.
Okay, so I have the ChatGPT SOP with me now and I've gone through it. I've taken some time to analyze it and honestly it's done a better job than what I thought it would. It's done a very good job of actually adhering to all the instructions I gave it. It's not invented any new information and it actually ended up writing a conclusion that was pretty inspiring. The only issue I have with the ChatGPT SOP, I think, is the fact that it did not adhere to the word limit guidelines. So I set a minimum word limit of 700 words and a maximum word limit of 1000 words. But it's written about 650 words worth of an SOP. The other issue with this SOP seems to be that it completely missed out on the university specific information. So just to give some context in terms of the student, he's interested in applying for a master's in computer science in AI at Stanford University, and I had made a point to explain or add into the prompt the different courses at Stanford that could help the student, how the student could contribute to Stanford, the different professors that the student is interested in working with, and a bunch of other details in the prompt. But it's not picked up on any of that, it's completely missed out on that, and it's not added that information. So while this SOP in general is good, it doesn't do a good job of explaining why the student wants to go Stanford, right? So I think that's my only complaint with this SOP. Otherwise, it's done a better than expected job. So that was ChatGPT. Now let's feed the same prompt and the same information to Gemini. So I'm again going to go ahead and feed this information into Gemini now.
One eternity later.
Okay, so now I have the Gemini SOP with me. It's actually pretty close to ChatGPT. It's done better in some regards and it's done worse in some regards. So let me first start with what's better. So first of all, while ChatGPT did not actually adhere to the word limit, it went below 700 words. Gemini did a fantastic job. Gemini actually wrote an SOP which is around 915 words, which is the typical length of an average SOP. So it got that right. The other thing that I think Gemini did really well was explaining to the user the impact of different projects. So as I mentioned that we've entered a lot of information about what the student has done in college. And ChatGPT did a good job in terms of explaining why the student did something or the implications of it. But Gemini did a damn good job of actually explaining the impact of every project on the student's profile. That's not something that ChatGPT actually was able to effectively do. So again, Gemini probably will do better on this parameter compared to ChatGPT. But now I want to talk a bit about where Gemini actually faltered a bit. So Gemini actually ended up inventing a lot of new information. There were lots of things that Gemini had which I believe are actually factually incorrect. And it was dangerous for me to have submitted this sort of an SOP without actually having proofread it, because if this were a real SOP, I would be caught, right? Because it's flat out wrong information that Gemini is giving. And so I think it's going to lose some points over there. But overall, I would say if I were to compare the two, they seem pretty close to one another, right? So that's my analysis on Gemini. And now I want to do the same thing with DeepSeek, the third AI that we're filming for today's video. So here goes.
One eternity later.
Okay, so I now have the DeepSeek SOP with me. I've gone through it and I've analyzed it. And honestly, guys, I'm a bit disappointed. ChatGPT and Gemini were pretty close to one another. DeepSeek's not done a good job at all. This SOP honestly feels abrupt. There are sentences that are very robotic. You can almost make out, I mean, you don't even need an AI detection tool. You can just make out that this was something that was written by AI, not a human. It's also sounding very listy. So, you know, where you have like 3 or 4 different achievements that you've had in college, you want the AI to tie those things together, right? In a very coherent manner. DeepSeek almost sounds like an expanded resume where it doesn't connect one achievement or one project to the next. That's not a problem that I faced with ChatGPT and Gemini, but that is a big problem with DeepSeek. The other issue with DeepSeek is that it has also invented new information of its own. Even though I told the AI which subjects I wanted to study at Stanford, it went ahead and ignored that. Not only did it ignore that, it invented a completely new course that doesn't exist at Stanford. And it went ahead and added that to the SOP, right? So this is my brief analysis of all the 3 AIs, but I think this needs more rigorous analysis. This is just an overview. So let's try to actually identify different parameters on which to score these 3 different statements of purpose, and let us try to actually figure out which did the best. Okay guys, so I've racked my brains. I've come up with what I feel is a very robust scorecard that captures all the important information it needs to. So my scoring card actually has 10 different parameters on which I've marked the different statements of purpose. And the way the scoring works is that every SOP gets a score of 1 to 5 on each parameter. There are 10 parameters in total. And so we're going to add up all the scores at the end and give a final SOP score out of 50. I'm going to now walk you through every parameter one by one, and I'm going to explain to you what scores I gave to each SOP, and I'm going to explain why I gave those scores. So the first parameter, and this should now be visible on your screen, is adherence to instructions and the word limit. So remember how I told you that I gave a bunch of instructions and I gave it a word limit? I think that's the first thing that you need to judge any AI on, because if it can't do something as simple as follow instructions, then why are you even using the AI, right? Now, in that regard, I've given ChatGPT a 4 on 5. The only reason I give it a 4 on 5 and not a 5 on 5 is because it did mess up the word limit and it didn't actually add the university specific details. Gemini gets a 5 on 5 over here. I don't really see any reason why I need to deduct or dock any points for Gemini. And DeepSeek basically just gets a 3. Again, it did not adhere to the word limit, which is something I forgot to mention in the preliminary analysis. But actually DeepSeek's SOP, just like ChatGPT, was below 700 words. And on top of that, it was inventing information, so it did not adhere to the script or the instructions that I gave it, which is why I've given it a 3 on 5. Now, the next parameter is the use of factual input only. And by this, I mean any information that I've given as a part of the student profile should be considered as factual input. Anything outside that should not be written by the AI into the SOP. So here I think ChatGPT gets a solid 5 on 5. It didn't invent anything of its own. It was very good. Gemini gets a 1 on 5. I counted 3 or 4 instances in the entire SOP where it basically just invented new facts, alright? Facts that might be plausible but weren't something that I had given it. And DeepSeek I'm giving on 4 on 5. Why am I giving it a 4 on 5? Why am I giving it a higher score than Gemini? Because it did invent information but only in one place, while Gemini did it in 3 or 4 different places. So that's my score for the use of factual input. The third parameter is flow and structure. Now, flow and structure is very important when it comes to a statement of purpose, because if your statement of purpose actually doesn't flow properly, then it's going to cause a lot of pain to the person who's reading it, because it's going to sound out of, every paragraph is going to sound out of context or out of place, and so the flow is very important. I have no complaints in terms of the flow and structure for any of these 3 AI tools. All of them did a fantastic job, which is why all of them get a 5 on 5 in this parameter. So the fourth parameter that we have is reflection and personality. So what does this mean? So when a human writes a statement of purpose, the expectation is that you bring in your own personality into the writing, and you also reflect upon everything that you've done in the past. That's what makes you human, and that's what the admissions officers want to see. So I feel like this is a very important parameter. I think on this parameter, ChatGPT did the best. It gets a 5 on 5. Its ending actually blew me away. So it did something very interesting where it opened the SOP in a certain manner, and then in the end, in the conclusion, it again referenced the opening to a very intelligent callback. Alright, I didn't really expect it to be able to do this sort of reflection, but it did that. And I had told all 3 AIs to have a warm tone while speaking, or a very warm personality while writing the SOP, and I think ChatGPT did a very good job of sounding warm. Gemini gets a 3 on 5. I'm not giving it a 5 on 5 because it wasn't as reflective as ChatGPT. So while ChatGPT was good at explaining why it did certain things, Gemini was good at explaining the impact of the things that the student had done. But that's not the same as reflection, which is why I'm giving it a 3 on 5. And DeepSeek again over here gets a 1 on 5. There was no reflection, there was no personality. Like I said before, it just sounded like an expanded resume with a list of different bullet points. Now, the next parameter, the fifth parameter, is the hook or the opening strength. So guys, this is a very important point again. Admissions committee members read your statement of purpose only for 3 to 4 minutes, not more than that, because they're going to thousands of applications. And you want to make sure that you open strong, you have a strong hook, because if you don't have a strong hook, they will read the rest of your SOP, but they won't be engaged. So they're not going to be left with a very strong impression if you don't start strong, which is why the hook is very important. And I'm disappointed to say that all 3 of these tools did equally poorly. I'm giving them a 2 on 5 because technically they did the right thing, they opened in the right way, but they didn't open in an impactful way. I had given a few words in terms of why I was interested in computer science, 40 to 60 words around in the student profile, and all they did was copy paste the content that I gave it and tweaked a few words here or there. So it was not very impactful to me. Which is why I'm giving all 3 AIs a 2 on 5 for this parameter. So now the 6th parameter on which I'm judging all the 3 different AI is the academic and project integration. After all, it is very important that the AI should be able to extract what you've done in every project and how that project has contributed to your growth as a professional. And here I think all the 3 different AIs did a fantastic job. There's no reason for me to complain about this point. So I'm giving all of them a 5 on 5 over here. So good job to all the 3 different AIs. 7th point is integrating what you've learned from work and internships or skill representation. Now, here I don't think they did as good a job as what they did when it came to academic and project integration. I've given ChatGPT a 3 on 5 because it did struggle a bit to do this. In fact, it missed out on a very important internship that the kid had done at IISc Bangalore. Think about it. If you were applying to Masters in Computer Science at Stanford, and if you had an internship of around 3 or 4 months at IISc Bangalore on a major project, would you not include it? You would. But ChatGPT completely missed out on that, which is why I'm giving it a 3 on 5. Gemini did a better job. So Gemini was able to convey all the different internship work that was done. And I'm giving it a 4 on 5, not a 5 on 5, because recall how I told you that it invented some information. Most of the information that it invented was a part of the internships, which is why for this parameter it doesn't get a 5 on 5, it gets a 4 on 5. And again, the worst over here is DeepSeek. It gets a 2 on 5. Again, my main complaint with DeepSeek is that it's just listing down everything that I've given without any reflection, any personality or anything of that sort. So it gets a 2 on 5. The next point is program fit and anchors. When you write an SOP, you need to explain to the university why the university should choose you and why you are a good fit for the university, or why the university's program is going to help you in achieving your career goals. Now, ChatGPT gets a 0 on 5. Like I said before, it just completely skipped this part. It did not use any of the information, so I'm giving it a 0. Gemini did a better job, so did DeepSeek, but they both get only a 2 on 5 because I feel like they could have used the information I provided more effectively. There's a lot of fodder content that I had given AI in terms of how Stanford's program would help the student and how the student would contribute to the program, but they didn't pick up on most of it, though they included some of it, so they both get 2 on 5. The 9-point parameter is tone and style. Here again, ChatGPT is the leader of the pack. It gets a 4 on 5 because, like I said, it added its own personality, it had a warm tone, and it adhered to the grammatical style that I had expected it to. In fact, I had told all the AIs to use active voice and not passive voice. I think ChatGPT did this the best, so it gets a 4 on 5. Gemini gets a 3 on 5 because it did adhere in terms of its tone and style, but not consistently. So there were some places where it didn't adhere to the tone and style, but for the most part it did, so it gets a 3 on 5. And DeepSeek, again, dead last, it gets a 1 on 5 because it did not adhere to anything I said. In fact, again, there was no personality in the statement of purpose. And the last thing is the closing and the career goals, the conclusion and what the child or the student wants to do short term and long term in life. So here again, like I said, ChatGPT had a very important callback that it did to the top, which is why it gets a 5 on 5. It was brilliant. Gemini gets a 3 on 5. It was articulate in terms of how it described the short-term and long-term goals, but there was no emotion in it. It was like a matter-of-fact sentence that it basically wrote down. And DeepSeek again gets a 1 on 5. The only good thing about DeepSeek's conclusion, if I'm being very honest, is the fact that I knew that it was a conclusion and I would not have to read any more of this crap SOP. So now we're done scoring each of the AI on the 10 different parameters. And what you can see is that ChatGPT is the winner. It gets a 38 on 50. Gemini comes in with a 33 on 50 second, and DeepSeek is dead last, 26 on 50. I don't think that's surprising for anyone. Now, 38 on 50 is a perfectly respectable score, but the fact is that if you're applying to top ranked universities, or if you want to write persuasive statements of purpose to get scholarships, then you need at least a 45 on 50. A 38 on 50 is just not going to cut it. Most human writers who are at the elite level are going to score a 45 on 50 or higher. And therefore, if your goal is to get into very high ranked universities, think Oxbridge, think Ivy tier universities, or if you want to bag scholarships like 50, 60, 70%, AI is not going to help you. Now, if you are applying to mid universities, something which is ranked between, let's say, 300 to 500 or below that, maybe these statements of purposes could work, but for top ranked universities, they won't. Now, having said all this, I know that many of you probably do want the input format that we have used to feed information to the 3AI. You also probably want access to the prompt that we use. It's very detailed. So I'm going to share a number at the bottom of my screen that you will see. Feel free to WhatsApp us on that number and we'll get back to you with the required files, and then you can use them to write your statement of purpose. Now, I know that this is not going to help you write a kick-ass SOP and you probably need extra help with your own SOP. So here's what we're going to do. If you want me to review your SOP for free, comment SOP in the comments below and I'll select 5 random kids whose SOP I would like to review. So with that, I will take my leave, and if you like this content, do subscribe to our channel by clicking on the bell icon, and I'll see you in the next one.